Whenever I talk, I get delayed feedback through your monitor, so it's going to probably be useful if you mute your. Let's fix this up. Okay. Thank you. Tēnā koroa, thank you for allowing me. You are tiny down in the back of the room, but that's okay. Allowing me to zoom into this meeting, even though I'm only a couple of blocks away. We're heading into our own council meeting, so I appreciate that. Very excited on the bus today to get my B card handed to me by my bus driver. There's a degree of uncertainty as to when this system is going to take effect from. I don't know if you can answer that, but it would be useful if we've heard mid-August, we've heard late August, just to give people a degree of certainty. I'll take our submission as read, and I don't intend to keep you particularly long. And thanks for the free bus ride in today, by the way, it's appreciated. In the council, the city council has long been an advocate of cheaper bus fares, reduced fares on public transport, because we know it's one of the three main drivers of increased patronage alongside frequency of service and the legibility of the service. So while we believe it's critical, we know it's not everything, and the other two can be addressed through the review of the Regional Public Transport Plan in the new year, and we look forward to that. But that's not to say that this isn't important in terms of making it easier for more people, or more attractive for more people to use public transport in the city. And we know that we won't be able to achieve our various strategic goals around our integrated transport network, around our transition to being a net zero carbon city, around social well-being and social inclusion and connectedness, if we don't make it easier and more attractive for people to use our bus service. And this is an important part of that. So by and large, we applaud the proposal for a flat fare service, and I'm sure yourselves, like we have been ever since such a system was introduced in Queenstown, have been inundated with interest and enthusiasm for rolling out a similar scheme in Dunedin, and here we are. We really have, so fully supportive of the intent and of the simplicity that it offers. We really have two main concerns, I guess, that we want to address through this conversation. One is ironing out what we see as perverse outcomes that have arisen out of the simplicity of the proposed fare structure, so that while we acknowledge that particularly for users in the outlying townships, this is considerable in terms of making the service cheaper for a number of reasonably vulnerable user groups. Taking short trips will become not insignificantly more expensive. So single zone fares for children, for students, for users, go-kart extra users, as they were called, users with disabilities and others, those trips will become more expensive, and they are people who are less likely in many cases to have the luxury of transport choice. And so I think we need to try and address that. We're open-minded as to what a solution might be, whether it's to lower the flat fares altogether, or whether it's a question of introducing a concession fare of $1, for example, for those groups. It just seems unhelpful to our shared goal of driving increased patronage on the bus service for those groups to end up paying more to use the service. To that end, in the current financial year in the City Council's budget, we'd set aside up to $600,000 of unbudgeted expenditure to offset bus fares in the city before we'd been made aware of the proposal that is currently before us. So, that was the kind of thing that we were looking at using that money for. And now that we have this proposal to work from, we are supportive of having a conversation about how we can help iron out those perverse outcomes using the budget that we've set aside for that purpose. So, totally, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know what the ideal structure is, but it's just really flagging our intent that we want to be able to do that so that, vulnerable groups in our community aren't disproportionately worse off under this system. The other concern really is what happens in January, and this is a trial or a pilot or whatever the phrasing is, but it's a significant one, and we're talking about shifting trips from, say, someone taking an adult taking a return trip from Mosgiel, I think currently is about $8.88, let's say, and it'll now be $4 under the proposal. That's significant, and hopefully, when we have a shared desire, I think that will drive more people to use those services. And it seems unfortunate then that should that expire at the end of the calendar year, that you're then increasing fares by more than 100% for those users. So I think it's imperative that the city and the region and NZTA collectively, between now and the end of the calendar year, have some serious conversations about how we might address that, or how we might fund the extension of that. It just seems it seems counterproductive, I think, to the shared aims we have to make such significant progress in the short term, and then equally quickly go backwards and wait for the regional public transport review work to get done. So those are really the only 2 points that we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm sorry we started this quickly. I didn't introduce Brian Baxter, who's Commissioner, who's assisting in this process. You're happy to take some questions. Can I just take first, though, one of the problems perhaps is that we're not selling this as a discounted service while we change to V card. And should we be clearer about this being a temporary discount rather than a flat fare trial? Because in that way, you realise that you're making a saving rather than that increase that happens in January if it should happen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could do that. I don't think, regardless of what you put on the brochure, the net effect is going to be that people will get used to, as you want to, using a service at a particular cost. And if that changes upwards as dramatically as we're proposing it change downwards, I think regardless of how you sell it, the response is going to be the same. And I think that the key is to try and avoid a situation where we lose any progress we might be able to make in the current calendar year by doing that.
Okay, have you got some questions, Brian?
Not really a question. I guess I'm just in terms of clarification. What you're saying, Aaron, is that you're concerned, like a lot of the submitters were, about Zone 1, the increase in fares in Zone 1. What you're saying is that you have a pot of money that you're willing to talk to the regional council about in terms of using it to mitigate those effects. So you're supporting, I guess from my point of view, in terms of a commissioner, you're supporting the introduction of the low fare. There's a couple of issues that you want to address. You have a solution to that in terms of, or potential solution to that in terms of your $600,000, and you'll talk to Otago Regional Council about that. So that seems relatively clear cut. And then the other issue is what happens at the end of the trial, in terms of whether the regional council goes back to 5 zones, whether it sticks with a flat fare, whatever. And there's a process for that anyway in terms of the passenger transport plan and the processes associated with that. So you'll no doubt be involved in those as a major player in that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fair summary. Thank you, Brian. I mean, as a general principle, we don't want, while we're supportive of the intent of the trial, we don't want anybody to be made worse off because of it. And we're happy to wear I think for adults on a one zone trip, it goes from $1.92 to $2. That's neither here nor there. But for children and others, I think it goes from $1.32 to $1.50. I think the proposal, and that isn't insignificant for people making frequent trips. So yeah, and we're saying that we want to have that conversation, and we're happy to put skin in the game to help address those issues.
Yep. Thank you.
Aaron, I'm just going to ask a question of Gary, who's here. The example you gave of Mosgiel, of $8 for someone coming in from Mosgiel to Dunedin, and then you suggested it would reduce down to $4. You meant 2, didn't you? Have I got that right?
Oh, return, so $8.88.
Return.
Oh, return.
Yeah.
It's 440.
444. Apologies, I'm with you. Okay, thank you. No, that's great. Thank you very, very much. Any other questions you had?
If I can, Madam Chair, so the B card will go live in Dunedin on 1st of September. So
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up to the end of August and then 1st of September, charging fees.
On that count, I presume you're happy to share in the comms that will be coming out with about the B card, but also whatever the final decision is from here about how we message it in a consistent manner, because I do appreciate the idea of a flat fare is one thing, but we need to make sure people realise it's a trial and it's currently at a discount for most people.
Fine.
Yeah.
And the idea of a trial, if it works, you keep going, right? But and the only other thing, the only other thing that's probably worth flagging, it's not particularly relevant to this conversation, but some concerns have been raised with us around the security of people's data and information that's being requested in registering the B card service. And it's a conversation that we're going to have separately to this, but I just think it's worth flagging with staff if they're not aware of that at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Come 1st of January, you're hoping that we will have a fairly good idea about whether the trial, the problem with the 1st of January being an end of trial date is in order to react to that on the 1st of January is rather awkward given holidays. Have you got any comment about?
Well, I would have thought that we'd have a clear idea of whether it's working or not well in advance of the 1st of January, but you're right. I mean, government kind of shuts down, I mean, particularly if you're trying to get NZTA involved. And obviously there's going to be potentially continuity challenges at the government end between September and the end of the year as well. So, look, I mean, I just think we need to be monitoring this on the way through, as I'm sure staff will, in terms of patronage and the like, so that we can get early indications of whether things are working or not. And certainly you wouldn't want to wait till January to try and pick that up again.
Okie dokie. Thank you. I suppose the question then is, and does that cover the student population for long enough? Given it starts September, October, things start watering down with student numbers. November, December, very few students are around. Is it the best time? Or I don't know. I'm just.
Oh, I mean, September, October is reasonably. I mean, exams sort of end of October, early November, aren't they? I mean, there's no there's no perfect time.
Perfect.
But this is what we've got, and we'll use the data that we get out of this to inform what we do beyond this.
Great. Enjoy your council meeting.
We'll do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. That's a very helpful submission. Gary, just so we're technical issue here, I'm not sure that we've got the full submission on the copies that we've been given. Were you reading out that? It was a very good, Mr. Deans, was it, who did the original submission? Yeah. But I think ours falls off the page on both sets that we've got. Sorry, apologies if we can. Does that make sense? Thank you. Because your solutions weren't on our page, and it's really helpful to hear those. So thanks, Angus. Have you got any questions?
Not really. I mean, it's pretty clear. Half for disadvantaged groups, I guess, and if you're allowed to use those terms, and for children.
So one of the reasons we're doing this is to make it easy, I think, for the registration purposes. And your thoughts are that if we advertise it well, that when you get your B card, you go along with I suppose the problem is people using other people's cards and trying to get discounts when it's unfair. And that's the technical issue. We're trying to make it easy in that process. So, but we should be encouraging, if we did that when you get your B card, you take your community services card and or ID to show child would be at school?
Yeah, I'd say a school child, right, yeah.
Okay.
Much more convenient for them,
Yeah, so, okay. What's the definition of child, Gary, at present? Please remind me.
Is the child concession to be replaced by something we're calling youth, and so that will be up to and including 18 years. So that'll hopefully pick up all your secondary students, and so the other tertiary one becomes a tertiary Go Card Extra.
And if you're an apprentice or a worker generally, or even unemployed, you would still get that at under 18?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And in order to register that, we're just talking through Angus's proposal. When you went to register for the B card, you'd have to take some proof of ID. Does that become a difficulty?
No, so for people up to 18, the name asks for their date of birth. Okay. And so from that it works out that yes, they're 18.
Yeah. And if you've got a community service card, is there any possibility for that? Appreciating that this is a nationwide scheme, so we're trying to validate it's not just about Dunedin at this point.
Yeah, so we at the moment
disabilities.
Disabilities and community service cards that may be on.
So,
having a look at the co-card that may be on Widows benefits and all that.
Can I just ask, we're not intending to, or it is problematic to do that because of the way we're rolling this out? Because that comes to the nub of the...
So it would propose we'd be required to have, and that's why we went to that flat fare instead of saying let's stick with all the concessions as we have them now.
But come the 1st of January, your intention was that would then happen then?
Yeah, if we go back to...
If the discount stops?
The current concessions pre-COVID, then we have validation processes required for...
So, can I just tease this out, and I'm probably going to... This is the best time to do it at the start of the submissions. So, we've got 20,000 people who want to register for B card. We get them all registered, and then we're asking some of them to go back and re-register to get those discounts. And is that the easiest way for you to handle that?
Yes, I mean, we've got processes.
Yeah. Can I just check that you've got your mic on, not for the people here, but for the YouTubers? Sorry. And Okay, have you got any other? Oh. No, you just need to turn the mute button off, hopefully.
I thought it was.
Yes,
Oh, there we
okay,
go. Yeah, we had learned from the other regions with the super golds that it was quite time intensive to sit with, to visit various retirement villages and various groups and work with Grey Power to get their concessions loaded. And so by not putting that in that first instance, it would give us more time to work with, for example, that group. And that was, like Gary was saying, was because during COVID, the interactions, we didn't know what kind of interactions we'd be able to have.
I understand that. What I'm concerned about is the other ones with disabilities and the youth, and how it's a wonderful idea that the union's come up with, but how problematic it is and resource hungry it would be, and how, well, just understanding how resource hungry it might be to go down that path.
You mean in the new year?
No, now, if we were to do it now for the flat fares rather than come the 1st of January.
Except that it's the same idea. It just gives us that time. It gives us that time to sit down with the various groups and work through that process over the next few months, rather than having to try and get it all done before we launch that flat fare.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but it's, as we've heard, $35 a term cost to some. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I appreciate it. Any other questions, Brian?
Not really. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I guess I'm looking at it and saying, well, you know, a couple of months ago we had a 5-zone system, and then we've gone to a free system, and we're now in a bit of a transition between the free has ended pretty much, or the government is saying that the free, they're not going to be paying free fares anymore. So we need to work out how we go back to the 5-zone. But we've also got this B card thing coming in, and so and we want everybody to get a B card. Flat fares are tricky because, you know, somebody's always disadvantaged, somebody's always advantaged. The people who live in further out, the people who live in Mosgiel, I mean, I could talk of Palmerston ones who are going to have, they must be, you know, having a party out there, but there's not many of them. But the Mosgiel people, even everybody in zone 2 and 3 are better off. Inevitably, the ones doing short trips with flat fare systems tend to be the ones who pay, because you can't lower the fares so that everybody is better off, because then the ones that are further out are, you know, are paying virtually nothing, and your system is horrendously expensive. But the alternative, another alternative would be, I guess, to reduce the fare, the flat fare, to less than $1.50 for children anyway, and say, okay, if the children were paying $1.20, then that's pretty much covers them. They're not paying any more under the new system, but then, and sorry, I'm rambling a little bit of just my own thoughts, but we're only doing this for a couple of months. We're going to have another process where the fares after the 1st of January are going to be addressed, and that will also, and of course the big issues there will be what will happen with the previous passengers who had discounted fares, the ones that we've been talking about. So I guess I'm sort of seeing it as a short-term